We are getting closer to an Aaron Rodgers decision, and all signs point to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll break it down on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the data queen, Michelle Majuk. On today's episode, we are going to take a look at the quarterback competition in Indianapolis and who we think will win. We're going to talk about Kupp coming free and Joey Bosa going to the Buffalo Bills. But we will start with the quarterback dominoes that we still need to see fall, and it all begins with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. Before we dive into all of it, do want to thank you for making the Locked On NFL podcast your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. But Michelle, right now it seems like a fight between the Giants and the Steelers for Aaron Rodgers. It appears like it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers, and quite frankly, folks, by the time that you hear this, it may already be the Pittsburgh Steelers. But for the moment, just to humor me, as someone who obviously is a Steelers faithful, what would be your initial reaction to Aaron Rodgers going to the Steelers?
There's no quarterback I want less. I texted my family because we're all big Steelers fans, and I said I'd rather my mother be the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers than that.
Right.
I'm hoping at the last second they decide, to maybe trade for Mason Rudolph, or is he available? I think he might be available. Anyone but Aaron Rodgers.
Yes, he's a free agent.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it seems like he's still going to ask for a decent amount of money. He's older.
Yes.
I understand at the end of the season, his numbers looked okay, but he also padded those stats in the last week of the season. He does not look the same. He couldn't do it with Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. He couldn't win any games. He had a good defense. Like, I get it. Like with Pittsburgh now, they have DK Metcalf. They have George Pickens. Like, it'd be a nice spot for him, I guess. But really, with Arthur Smith's offense, I can't see them vibing at all either. I think it'd be a disaster in the locker room. Imagine George Pickens and Aaron Rodgers working together. I cannot. I don't think it's a smart idea, but they also don't have a quarterback even assigned. Like, they don't have a single quarterback on the roster right now. So they got to do something.
Yeah, I quite frankly think that could be the most explosive trio. And I don't mean explosive like big plays on the football field. Aaron Rodgers with DK Metcalf, who is a historic sideline diva, and then George Pickens, who we know is one of the most unstable personalities in the entire NFL. Like, who's going to fight first? Pickens and DK, or one of those guys and Aaron Rodgers? Look, here, I laugh and I joke because I agree with you. It could be bad, and Rodgers certainly has his own downsides off the field as well. But I actually think that Rodgers is the best option for the Steelers. I've continued to say, and I've been consistent, I think Aaron Rodgers is better than Russell Wilson. I think the element that would be enticing with Russell Wilson is his ability to throw those deep balls with those two jump ball wide receivers on the sidelines. But I think Aaron Rodgers gives you some similar ability there. His special move and classic move is the back shoulder fade. I think both those guys could use their physicality on the sideline to do that. And the Steelers' offensive line struggled last year, and I just got done watching 17 games of Dan Moore tape. You're right about Arthur Smith. How did this guy captain the great Tennessee Titans offenses with Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown? Like, how is this the same guy? So confusing watching their offense last year. But Aaron Rodgers does get the ball out of his hands quick. So that would maybe help the Steelers' offensive line, but that doesn't really mesh with what Arthur Smith typically likes to do with the rollouts. I do want to at least pivot to Aaron Rodgers to the Giants, because it sounds like you're obviously not a big fan of Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers, but do you think he would be a better fit for the Giants than for the Steelers?
I guess, but the Giants should definitely be trying to look for their quarterback of the future, right? Like, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to come in and completely change the outlook of this team for next year. I mean, he was just with a New York team that had good weapons, that was supposed to have a really good defense. I know they fell off a little bit, but they still had a pretty solid defense overall. at least when Robert Saleh was still there. And he couldn't bring them to the playoffs, right? Couldn't even get close. So I just don't think he's going to change the Giants. Now, he could work with Malik Neighbors, and I think that'd be great for Malik Neighbors in fantasy football. So if you love fantasy football, cool. That's a good
Right.
destination for, Neighbors to have a lot of value there. But I just don't know why any team would want Aaron Rodgers right now. Especially if you're in a desperate need for a quarterback, because that means you really need to find your quarterback of the future, right? And you have no one even on the team where you're like, well, maybe he can groom them, which we know Aaron Rodgers wouldn't want to do anyways. He's not going to coach anyone up. So I don't get it.
Yeah, it's a confusing situation, but the timeline of things and what's going on in New York with this decision, Patricia Traina from Locked On Giants talked about that.
Russell Wilson, who is also still in play as I record this for the Giants, he may go back to Pittsburgh. It all depends on what happens with Rodgers. So Rodgers is really the next domino in this whole thing. So if Rodgers turns down the Steelers, I believe the Steelers are going to crank up their efforts to bring back Russell Wilson. If Rodgers decides to go to the Steelers, then that probably opens up Wilson to the Giants, assuming that they can agree to terms. Now, I also reached out to another colleague of mine over in the Pittsburgh area. Matter of fact, I just got the information in here. I said, what's going on? What have you heard? He says, and I quote, from what I understand, Steelers and Giants both prefer Rodgers over Wilson. Giants' offer is for more money. Steelers not trying to overspend. Rodgers is deciding what's better. But if he takes too long, the Steelers will just choose Wilson. So again, Rodgers technically, not that there's a deadline on when he has to decide, but he has until 4:01 p.m. And that's when I think teams are going to say, hey, what's your verdict here? Are you coming to us or are you not? And if you're not, or if you're going to keep dragging this out, we're going to move on to the next thing.
And it's so funny that Patty's talking about that on our show. And immediately on Wednesday, we see Russell Wilson taking a visit to the Cleveland Browns. Then Russell Wilson on Friday taking a visit to the New York Giants. It's playing out exactly how Patty said it would, where if Aaron Rodgers drags his feet past 4:00 and recording this after 4:00, then we'd start to see some pressure. And the Giants are like, hey, if you don't want to come here, then we're going to host Russell Wilson. So if you're the Giants right now, do you wait for Aaron Rodgers with the signs pointing to Pittsburgh and let him use you as a tool? Or do you go straight to Russell Wilson and just say, hey, we're not dealing with that circus?
I just don't know why the Giants have to do either of those two things. They have the number 3 overall pick. Just trade up to number 1 if you really want Cam Ward and use your assets there. Why are there two options, Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers? Like you brought up, well, he would be a better option than Russell Wilson. That's the lowest bar ever. I mean, yeah. Right. Russell Wilson right now can only do one thing. It's the moon ball. And that's it. Like that's literally all that he has left. He is in Ben Roethlisberger's stage of the last year, right? When his arm was destroyed and all he could do is just like kind of throw it up. And now Russell Wilson isn't hurt, but like he's not able to throw in the middle of the field. He's not able to he's not going to make the Giants a winning team either. The Giants have the number 3 overall pick for a reason. And yeah, a big part of that was that they didn't have a quarterback last year, but Russell Wilson does not fix that for them. So you're sitting so close to the number 1 overall. Just get there. Unless they really don't like Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders at all, then maybe they'll go this route and fumble the bag for one more year to try.
No, I don't like any of that. Michelle, from your lips to Joe Shane's ears, you need to trade up to number 1. You're going to have to pay a first next year to do it. But hey, it's the right thing to do, Giants. Come on, let's get that done. But with that being said, Cooper Kupp finally free, Joey Bosa to the Buffalo Bills. What's going to happen with these players going forward? Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out and online shopping and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You could track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money and start building your wealth. They give you great insights. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. And now I budget smarter and save more. It's all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling a bunch of apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use Locked On NFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code Locked On NFL for half off your first year. All right, Michelle, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the Aaron Rodgers decision, expecting him to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it's clear that the Giants aren't going to wait around, and they're trying to make some moves here. But with that being said, we do want to move forward because we got some movement in the NFL from two big names. One, Cooper Kupp. Kupp finally released by the Los Angeles Rams. We heard that they were looking for a potential trade for Cooper Kupp, all of those different things, but obviously none of those things ever materialized, and now he'll hit the open market. If you could pick a perfect fit for Cooper Kupp, where would you have him go next?
Oh, man, that is a tough one. Give me a second to think about that. I will say that it was the right move, I think, by the Rams to move on from Cooper Kupp and sign Davante Adams. I think that's absolutely huge for Matthew Stafford and what they can do. The Rams are really creating right now a pretty good team for next year. For Cooper Kupp, I think Baltimore could be enticing. I would have said Texans, but they traded for Christian Kirk.
Right.
The Chargers, maybe. The Raiders could use them. I mean, there's a bunch of teams that could utilize Cooper Kupp. It's like, how much does he have left, though? And that's the whole issue. Maybe if the Panthers are like, okay, our next Adam Thielen could be Cooper Kupp. Upgrade Adam Thielen to Cooper Kupp. They're kind of the same player, but you save, a year or two on Cooper Kupp. That could be an option as well.
Yeah, I think that would make a ton of sense. Honestly, I know that they traded for DK Metcalf, but the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you're going to bring in Aaron Rodgers, you might as well just go all out. You got a slot receiver. I know Calvin Austin was good last year, and they drafted Roman Wilson, so maybe they're like, oh, we got enough guys who can run in the slot. But I just continue to love the aesthetic that would create. I think if you really want to get crazy, what about the Philadelphia Eagles? Why not? You know what I mean? Why not bring in that guy who can run in the slot? You have Smith on the outside who can do some slot when you need to. You have A.J. Brown. Just double down. I think that could be a good option. Same thing. I feel like the Minnesota Vikings. You were with the Los Angeles Rams. You're going to be in a similar situation with a guy who knows how to use you and Kevin O'Connell. You could go for more money. Like a lot of people, this isn't just home cooking. If you look at a lot of the reports, all these graphics. So what is Cooper Kupp's next team going to be? The Titans are on there. The Titans have money to blow, and they need a wide receiver desperately. It's bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. Van Jefferson, wide receiver 2, baby. Let's go. But Cooper Kupp has to decide, do I want another decent payday? Do I want $20 million a year, $18 million a year? I think he could probably get 2 years, $36 million. I think he could get $18 million a year. But does he want that? Because if he doesn't want to just get the most money and he wants to actually compete to win games, then you could take $12 million to go somewhere where you could actually win. I know Buffalo just added Josh Palmer, but they could still use another receiver, and Cooper Kupp can move the chains, although you have Khalil Shakir, and that's a slot guy. But I think Cooper Kupp can move around. So really it's about what he wants to do going forward with the rest of his career and how much money he wants to make.
I also think Jacksonville could be interesting too, because I brought up the Texans just traded for Christian Kirk. They need Brian Thomas Jr. was a home run hit for them in the first round. Awesome. Awesome draft pick. But you could still utilize that possession wide receiver across from him. And really, I mean, he could also learn from Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is a great guy to learn, routes from. So that could be a really good landing spot too. And yeah, Jacksonville typically stinks, right? But they have a slight bit of hope to maybe make the playoffs and make a run with Trevor Lawrence. So at least there, it's not like Cooper Kupp's just saying, I'm going to a team that's terrible. They have a chance to actually make the playoffs.
And if you're Cooper Kupp, you look at a guy like Chris Godwin and what he's been able to do, in the last few years with Dave Canales and then with Liam Cohen, who's now the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it's like, oh, I could fill that role perfectly. And it's not just Christian Kirk. They lost Evan Ingram too, so their middle of the field chain moving guys are not available for them. So Cooper Kupp would make a ton of sense. Jacksonville was the team that I was kind of searching for in the back of my brain that he's been connected to all along. Jacksonville has been a whispered, Cooper Kupp, Jacksonville, you know what I mean? So I do think that's a good spot. And speaking of Evan Ingram, just went to the Denver Broncos, the Joker role in Sean Payton's offense. Everyone's been talking about it. What are they going to do? Now they get him. Just your quick thoughts. I love that fit. Denver needed a little bit more weaponry now that they have, a good foundation set. Love Evan Ingram to the Broncos.
I love that too. They definitely needed a better tight end. They needed to upgrade there. Evan Ingram's a good guy, good receiving tight end that could be over the middle of the field for that team. Why am I blanking? Bo Nix. For Bo Nix. They definitely need to give Bo Nix more weapons. I know he had a very, very good rookie season, but it can't just be again, okay, we have Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin. Like, get him more weapons, and that's a really good first start here for Evan Ingram.
Yeah, I agree. And you think back to Marquise Colston as a guy who was used in that role. And I think Evan Ingram, probably pretty similar athletic profile to a guy like Marquise Colston at their size and their speed, you know what I mean? So you could use him very similarly, do like that. But we do go to Buffalo where they added Joey Bosa. My guy Joe Marino from Locked On Bills talked about the ad.
58 sacks, 11 forced fumbles, 128 tackles for loss across his first 6 seasons. But then the last 3 years, injuries have been an issue. 51 games over the last 3 years that he could have played in, and he only played in 28. So he's only played in 28 of 51 games over the last 3 seasons. Now, I guess it's good that over the last 3 years, he's played more and more games. Going back to 2022, he played 5 games. 2023, 9 games. Last season, 14. So I guess that's trending in a good direction. And when he's been available, he's been very effective. But the missed time is obviously hard to ignore. And so that's kind of the story here, is he's definitely a player that can come in and be the answer at defensive end that this team needs. But there's certainly some injuries to be mindful of.
Look, that's what this comes down to at the end of the day. This is the type of move I love when contending teams make, because you're good enough. They just brought back Gregory Rousseau. You could add more pass rush depth in the draft. It's a great draft, a historic draft for edge and defensive line. Like, you can get more help there. But if Joey Bosa hits, and look, to win a Super Bowl, you need some luck to break your way. You need a couple of guys not to get hurt. You need a couple of veterans to have bounce back seasons. You need some young guys to step up and play above their draft pick. Like, you need your free agent signings to hit. Like, that's the kind of stuff that has to happen for you to win a Super Bowl. So these kind of moves, while there is a lot of downside, at the end of the day, they paid Joey Bosa, what was it, $12 million? That is a low-end starter price tag. And if he hits, he's going to be one of the better pass rushers in the league in the top half if he plays his best. So this is the type of move I think that teams like the Bills absolutely should make 100% of the time.
I think if we took the name Joey Bosa off the jersey, then nobody would be like, oh, wow, a great value for the Bills. Like, this is exactly what he deserved. He hasn't done anything in a very long time. Also, like, for how much recognition this dude gets, he really was never that special throughout his career. I'm sorry, like, at least his numbers weren't. He had 12 and a half sacks. That's his career high, 12 and a half sacks. So that was all the way back in 2017. We know how long ago 2017 was at this point. He like 10 and a half sacks is maybe his ceiling, and he hasn't hit that since 2021. And not even just sacks, like quarterback hits aren't very impressive either. He hasn't had more than 20 since 2020, only has had more than 21 in 2 seasons in his career. He had one really great season of quarterback hits, and that was in 2019. So long ago again. I just think if you take the Bosa name out of it, like this last year, he played 14 games. He was on the field for 14 games. He had 5 sacks, 13 quarterback hits. Why do we act like this dude is special? I don't really get it. I feel like he's just taking over. They cut Von Miller. He's just going to take his role, get the 6 sacks, probably maybe 15 quarterback hits if you're lucky, and it's just a little filler role here. Hopefully they'll use him as a rotational guy.
You hear that, Bean? You hear that, McDermott? You're idiots. You're fools.
Stupid.
What are you thinking? What are you thinking? Yeah, I mean, I understand the limitations there, but when you're trying to build out a rotation, I think for the money they paid, the upside that could be there, they still need to add in the draft, though. But it's a great draft for it. So let's see what Buffalo's able to continue doing. But with that being said, we got our first quarterback controversy of the NFL all season. Daniel Jones goes to Indianapolis. Who's going to win that battle? Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before at America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's going to cut down the nets. I love when I'm able to throw a little bit on a few underdogs, maybe go chalk with a few of the favorites. I can always use the spreads, the totals, the game props. I can stay in the action all tournament long because games are happening all the time, and the FanDuel app is simple. It's easy to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Again, it's FanDuel.com. All right, Michelle, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about Aaron Rodgers and his decision and the dominoes, Kupp, Bosa, Evan Ingram to the Broncos. Now I want to talk about the biggest signing that happened yesterday, or on Tuesday, I guess I should say, and it's Daniel Jones going to the Indianapolis Colts. And we talked about the signing on yesterday's edition of Locked On NFL, but I really want to start diving into who we think could actually win that battle. But we'll go to my guy, Zach Hicks, from Locked On Colts to give you his thoughts on the signing.
But yeah, Daniel Jones coming to Indianapolis to compete with Anthony Richardson. And my overall thoughts on that are, I don't really think this is much of a competition still. I know that the money is kind of hefty, and the Colts have made this emphasis all offseason to say that, hey, this is an open competition. Whoever wins it in training camp is going to be our starter. But I would put kind of an asterisk on that in terms of saying, like, it's like the similar type of competition to when Richardson first came into the league and they said that he was competing with Gardner Minshew for the starting job in week 1. It was more so Richardson competing with himself to see who was going to be the starter in week 1. Like, if Richardson comes into camp, looks out of shape and not interested and looks like he hasn't made any improvements, then they'll go with Daniel Jones. But I don't think there's anything that Daniel Jones can do to win this competition in camp. It really comes down to how Anthony Richardson looks and what Anthony Richardson does or doesn't do in training camp. That'll determine who the starter is for the Colts going into the season.
I got to be honest with you. Shout out my guy, Zach. I think that's copium. Like, I think that's just holding on to Anthony Richardson. It's still his job. They're just bringing in Daniel Jones to motivate him. Daniel Jones is just a carrot for Anthony Richardson to get back on track. Like, no, my man, I feel pretty confident that the Colts are done with Anthony Richardson. And it's a quarterback competition is to save face. Daniel Jones is going to be their quarterback. He's a better passer and still gives you the running ability. He's not as good of a runner, but he is a little bit better of a passer, and that's really what they want. So we could class this up like it's just motivation for Anthony Richardson. I think Daniel Jones is the week 1 starter for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Anthony Richardson's numbers and also like deep into him, they're just so incredibly bad. I have a fun little stat here.
All-time bad.
So PFF has these accuracy rankings, right? Or like numbers. So the percentage of uncatchable, inaccurate balls that Anthony Richardson threw last year, it was 34% of his pass attempts. 34% uncatchable, inaccurate. The next closest guy was Caleb Williams at 23%.
Jeez.
And then everyone else is like 23 to, all the way down to 13. But a lot of guys are in that 17 to 23 range, right? Anthony Richardson at 34%. That's just insane. And shockingly, Daniel Jones last year was above average at 17.5%. So half of his numbers, half of Anthony Richardson. Richardson has just been such a bad passer. And I thought, I was like, okay, I'll check after he got benched, because I thought he looked a little bit better after getting benched and coming back. It was still at 32% of uncatchable and accurate throws. So still terrible. And unless he massively improves this offseason, and maybe he can find, someone to fix his game, then Daniel Jones is going to be the starter.
Listen, I got to be honest. This is probably a hot take. Probably should have went with this one earlier in the show. But if you put Daniel Jones on the Minnesota Vikings last year, I don't think their season is that much different. I think Daniel Jones is maybe a little bit more turnover prone, but he's a better athlete than Sam Darnold. I just think that Daniel Jones, we saw him win a playoff game when he was supported in a correct environment. Like, I think Daniel Jones is just a super mid-level quarterback. He has embarrassing moments, and playing in New York will make that even worse. Is, my guy, Mark Sanchez already knows, like, you do something in New York, it's way worse than if you did it in Jacksonville or Tennessee or Carolina or something like that. But I guess I don't think Daniel Jones is good, but I don't think that he's like trash garbage either. I think he's just as good as a lot of other mid-level quarterbacks that are only as good as the supporting cast around them. And I don't think that Anthony Richardson is that. I think Anthony Richardson is worse than that. I think he is bad. We could call it age, but you can only skate on age for so long before it's like, hey, maybe it's not just because he's young. Maybe he would be old and bad too. It's always young and bad can get better. Well, sometimes they're just bad, and it doesn't matter how old they are. But anyway, that's how I feel. So I'd ride with Daniel Jones.
I will say Anthony Richardson has only started 15 games in the NFL, and he had such few starts in college. He was supposed to be a project, and the Colts threw him right in and then gave him no time to be, and then benched him immediately. Like, that was not the point of drafting Anthony Richardson. So Richardson has still not even started a full season. Yeah.
He should have sat.
Yeah. Technically, he's still a rookie because he hasn't even started 17 games.
He ended up sitting a ton his rookie year because he got hurt, but he should have sat from the start. They should have had a better plan and not had him out there as the day one starter. He was so far away, and now they've killed his confidence almost. It's a tough situation, but I got to be honest with you. Deal with it, Indy. You had Peyton Manning for forever. You immediately got handed Andrew Luck, and you ruined that. I feel no remorse for the Indianapolis Colts. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. Again, expectation right now is that Aaron Rodgers will make his decision soon. Could happen, by the time that you hear this. We're expecting Pittsburgh, Minnesota trying to sneak back in. The Giants still there. Can't wait to see how it all plays out. But I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk. Thanks for tuning in. And as we tell you every episode, stay safe out there.
Bye, y'all.